The other thing that has them excited is Rand Paul. And a lot of them believe that this is kind of a turning point in the cycle leading up to 2014 of energizing principled conservatives. They see Rand Paul as a beacon they can all rally around and lead them forward. I assume we can read an editorial expressing similar sentiments in the Weekly Standard. Yes, Bill Kristol?
I just sent in my editorial, and it's not favorable to Rand Paul in the sense that I don't agree with his position on drones, and I think if he were to sort of dominate the Republican Party's debate on national security, the party would go in the wrong direction. Having said that, though, I also had that sense on Wednesday that this could be a moment, and that almost regardless of the merits, just the spectacle of a guy standing up on the Senate floor, ignoring the leadership of his own party, taking on the president and the attorney general, having other people rally to him, and sort of just doing it because he thinks it's right. I don't think it's right. I think it's kind of crazy to be worrying about this drone strikes against Americans sitting in a cafe, and I think it actually could undermine, in some ways, what's important about the war on terror. And nonetheless, I sort of understand, I think, the sentiment that people out there felt and are feeling, perhaps. And in that respect, it could be kind of a moment. Rick Santelli, in late February 2009, had that rant on CNBC, and it kind of helped spur what was already brewing, the kind of Tea Party rebellion. And the truth is, no one quite remembers what Santelli's, the particulars of his rant were. People now think it was all about the stimulus or Obamacare. It was actually about the president's mortgage proposal, which I don't even really remember anything about. But it sort of hit a nerve. And I do think Paul might have hit a nerve that could be energizing to Republicans and conservatives, even though I suspect on consideration, most Republicans and most conservatives aren't actually going to agree with him substantively.
But I think one thing that I've heard from, and this is New England where I am, we have a local Republican running for the U.S. Senate race who's a self-described moderate, social moderate, who jumped on the Rand Paul bandwagon because the part that resonated to him was making the president answer the question. And there's been a real sense the Republicans, particularly in the Congress, haven't done or been able to do their basic job of making the other branch of government accountable and more important to the average person, articulating the argument that would counter some of the stuff that's coming out of the White House. And here you had a guy who wasn't up screaming and yelling, some wild way like Michael Graham would. And he was having a principled conversation referencing to the Constitution and fundamental principles of the United States. And it worked. And it just it warmed the cockles of conservative hearts.
No, I think that's true to some degree. And I do think the Republican House could take a lesson from that. I mean, they do control the House. They do have the power to schedule hearings and have witnesses up. There's an awful lot of oversight of the executive branch that should be happening, and it happens very sporadically and really, I think, minimally. I mean, it's really startling, given the incredible targets of opportunity there in Obama's executive branch, how little the House has been able to do in terms of oversight, and maybe they'll take a lesson from Rand Paul and get to work on that.
The other thing that was inspiring to some of us was the gathering of people around Rand Paul, when South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, Texas Senator Ted Cruz, and then via the web, Marco Rubio showed up to support what he was doing, along with Mike Lee of Utah. And you look at that group of people, and it would be a pretty good poster for, Dream Team 2020 or, here's the future of the GOP. And what made it more sweet for me, Bill Kristol, as a longtime non-fan of John McCain, is that John McCain did exactly what I wanted him to do. He doesn't like these guys.
Well, look, I think McCain has actually substantive disagreements with Rand Paul and is worried, and Lindsey Graham is as well, that the party is going in the wrong direction on this issue to the degree it rallies to Paul's substantive points, as opposed to just, let's stand up to the president and the AG and demand answers, which in a way is, Paul was very clever to frame it that way, as opposed to sort of, he backed off in a sense about making his full-scale argument about U.S. foreign policy.
Right.
And so it was everyone could rally to him. So he is a clever politician. One thing I do say in the editorial, I don't agree with Paul. I hope this isn't a turning point in the party's views on national security. But one thing I do say is other Republican politicians could learn a little bit about politics from Paul. They could learn a little bit about how to seize a moment, how to take center stage, how to dramatize an issue, how to dramatize themselves. They could be more entrepreneurial. That's really impressive, I think, what Rand Paul pulled off. He has a real instinct, the way other previous politicians have, for
and as you just noted,
a moment.
He found the area where the interests, where the circles cross. He found that center in the circle, and it was very, very smart, as opposed to John McCain, who went out of his way to insult Rand Paul supporters as, whatever they call them, kids in a college dorm room or whatever. How about
be flattered by that, Michael?
How about some bringing people together stuff here?
You should be flattered by that. He's making you younger than you are. A youthful guy out there cheering on Rand Paul. There will have to be a serious debate, obviously, at some point about Republican views on national security,
right.
and I do think Paul's thing was irresponsible in certain ways. But having said that, it just as a matter of political theater, it was impressive.